Good evening. This is Rainbow Rick with the World News. This just in. When Scott Morrison was the Managing Director of Tourism Australia, he was sacked for fraud. Now that's not breaking news, but what exactly did Scott Morrison do? Well, the first thing Scott Morrison did when he became Managing Director of Tourism Australia was to start dishing out sweet deals to his mates, and he did that to the tune of $184 million. Now, when Scott Morrison did that, he did it for one of two reasons. Either he was repaying favours that someone had done for him previously, or he wanted something now. It might have been cash. When you dish out nearly $200 million to your mates, there's bound to be room for a little bit of folding stuff to come back to you. Or he may have just wanted some favours. But in any event, you don't dish out $184 million to your mates fraudulently without wanting something back. And the Attorney General's Department was scathing in its condemnation of Scott Morrison's criminal behaviour, so he was sacked. But when Scott Morrison was sacked, he was not penalised in any way whatsoever. He didn't go to jail. He wasn't fined. He didn't do weekend detention. He didn't even do community service. He got away, as it is said, scot-free, adding a whole new dimension to that term. But Scott Morrison's biggest crime was not his criminal fraud. Scott Morrison's biggest crime was his betrayal of the Australian people. The Australian people voted Scott Morrison into Parliament, understanding that he would take care of Australia and Australians, to take care of matters on their behalf. But instead of doing that, he just started looking after his mates and subsequently sacked. Just a few short years later, Scott Morrison shows up and he's the Prime Minister. He stands in front of the Australian people and says, "You can trust me. I'm just one of you. I understand you people. I'm just an ordinary Aussie just like you." Bullshit. Ordinary Aussies don't screw the country by betraying their trust. So here we are, a country in turmoil with Scott Morrison at the helm. God help us. I just hope all you monkey whores that voted for Scott Morrison like sex. I hope you love sex. For your own sake, because the more you love sex, the less painful it's going to be when Scott Morrison's banging you up the back passage every day while he's in power. But what about me? What about the rest of us who didn't vote for Scott Morrison? We never gave Scott Morrison any kind of permission or consent to screw us. And in the end, it doesn't matter how many times you cut it up, look at it, put it back together. It comes out exactly the same. Every Australian, every man, woman and child, especially our children, are copping it up the calaca from Scott Morrison. In other news, the Australian tourism industry is in turmoil. It's a crisis. It's affecting the economy. It's times like this we need a superhero, someone to stand up. It's time for Scotty from marketing to dust off his cape, fly back to Tourism Australia and make another ad. Yes. Australia, the sex capital of the world. If you haven't had a good root for a while, get your bloody self down under. I'll give you a right royal shag and that'll make your eyes water. Don't believe me? Ask any Aussie. They'll back me up. But all jokes aside, Scott Morrison is a dangerous, happy, clapping fool. And something needs to be done. What can we do? Well, we can have a peaceful protest. We can go to the streets with some signs and voice our displeasure. Scott Morrison would love that. He'd be straight on the phone to his mate, the police commissioner. Hey, mate, they want to have a peaceful protest. Can you issue a permit and block off any streets they want to, Thanks, mate. Governments love peaceful protest. It shows the world that they're allowing democracy to be expressed while they ignore it. They ignore it 100%. And around the world right now, there are so many countries up in arms with violent protests. Now that doesn't work either. That would just give Scott Morrison an excuse to come out with the water cannon, the rubber bullets, the pepper spray and quell the rebellion. This is not Australia. Australians are better than this. If Australians want to protest, they should do it peacefully. Ooh. Back to the peaceful protest. Neither of those work. And it's not much good just sacking Scott Morrison, because who's going to replace him? Peter Dutton? The little Hungarian? Matthias Cormann, McCormack, Angus Taylor, Richard McKenzie, Michaela Cash, oh God. No, there's no point in replacing Scott Morrison within the Liberal Party. What needs to happen is that we restructure the political system in Australia so that it can be truly governed by people who are doing it in the best interest of Australia and Australians. There must be a way to do that, because there are so many people who are sick to death of the corruption and the bullshit of Australian politics. There is a way. There's a third way. And we'll explore that. Have a think about it. There's a way we can do this from the safety and comfort of our lounge rooms, without going into the streets with peaceful protests or violent ones. We can do it from here. So we'll have a look at that soon. In the meantime, this is Rainbow Rick, the World News. Thanks for watching. See you next time and have a good night.